Hello and welcome to Into the Woods with Holly Wharton. This podcast is all about our journey into the woods of ourselves, getting to know who we are, and where we're going in life so that we can create the life that we want to live. It's about deepening your connection with yourself, taking inspired action, and really trusting yourself and your intuition. It's also about mindset. Our beliefs are such an important part of this journey. And there are so many ways for us to change our mindset so that we can more easily live a life of expansive joy. This podcast is also about going literally into the woods and spending time in nature, and how that can help us on our own personal journey of self-knowledge. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now let's get into this week's episode. Hello, adventurers, and welcome to the Into the Woods podcast, episode 448. This is your host, Holly Wharton, and I'm back with another exciting guest. Today, I'm talking with Dominique Brightmon about elite performance. In this episode, he shares his top tips for achieving elite performance in business, work, and life, and how we can apply that to our adventures. He's got some great tips on little actions that we can take each day to improve our lives and our adventures. So, who is Dominique Brightmon? He is an award-winning speaker and certified member with the John Maxwell Team. He's the best-selling author of Going North, Tips and Techniques to Advance Yourself, Stay the Course, The Elite Performer's 7 Secret Keys to Sustainable Success, and he's the contributing author for Crappy to Happy, Sacred Stories of Transformational Joy. Dom hosts the Going North podcast, a top-rated self-help podcast that interviews authors from all over the world. His mantra is, advance others to advance yourself. So what are you going to learn in this week's episode? We talk about what is elite performance and how it applies to life, why anyone can be an elite performer, the 5 keys to being an elite performer, daily habits of elite performers that you can practice without too much time, the new twist on a gratitude journal that you'll love, I really like this idea, and finally, how to develop a rock-solid positive mental attitude and why this is so important. So, hope you enjoy this week's episode. Here you go. Hello, Dom. How are you doing today?
Doing fabulous. How's the heavenly Holly doing?
Doing really well. Thank you. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today about elite performance, something that I've kind of been thinking about for the last couple of years, and I really look forward to getting your perspective on it. So why don't we start out by having you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Well, thank you. Thank you indeed, Holly. So for those who don't know me yet, I like to call myself the Chocolate Adonis just for laughter purposes. But hey, the real story is name's Dominique Dom Brightmon, and I'm a certified self-leadership trainer that likes to coach, empower, and inspire others to share their stories, because people telling their stories and putting their pens to paper and putting their work out there and joining what I like to call the business of immortality by publishing their work is really helped me to stand on the shoulders of giants and get to where I am today, having this wonderful conversation with you. So yeah, that's the elevator pitch, but the deeper version is where I actually grew up as a church boy and was a quiet kid that eventually found his confidence in his teenage years and early 20s and discovered personal development after a nice little wonderful year where we thought the world was going to end, and all that really happened in the US of A is that we lost Twinkies for a month. The year of 2012 had a nice little setback sandwich that actually was a setup for a wonderful decade of comebacks. Since my goodness, it's about to be 10 years since. I can't believe that year happened.
So I assume that's the year when you started thinking about elite performance and what that meant.
Oh yes, in a way, yes. Yeah, it was hit with a 3-pronged attack. Like late July that year, 2012, my father went out for a drive like he usually does, but he got lost for like 36 hours. Like, the heck is going on here? And he ended up in a small town. We got like a call like 1:34 a.m. in the morning saying like, hey, we found your father. He was driving on the opposite side of the road. And we're like, oh, darn. He was in a town called Silver Spring, Maryland, which is like a good 40 miles outside of Baltimore. Like, the heck is he doing in there? And then we discovered that he had Alzheimer's when we got the news. Like, oh, crap. Well, this sucks. Had to take away his license. And thank God I got my license a couple of years earlier and got a little more experience under the wheel, because I became one of the main drivers of the household after that. And a month later and some change, I turned 21, and on my way to IT security class, my car crashed when I was making a left turn when my brake jammed. And thank God I had no injuries because injuries could suck really bad, as I'm
Mm.
pretty sure you know from
Yep.
experience too. And to top it all off, the personal was showing up in the professional because I had a part-time job at the library at the time, and I was called in a couple weeks later because some colleagues were noting some things where I had some miscommunication issues, and boss called me in and noted all these things where I was screwing up. And I'm like, oh dang, I thought I was doing okay. I guess I
Mm.
wasn't. And it's like, wow. So like seeing your loved one starting to decay and almost crash your car, possibly losing your life on my birthday, which actually is kind of one of my
Mm.
birthday gifts of my life thus far, surprisingly, and almost like getting called in the office, reprimanded by the boss. And it's like, oh crap, like all these three things. So that
Mm.
just led me to realize, you know what? Something has to change here. And funny enough, like I know the show is about going into the wonderful woods, and sometimes we go into the woods of our own life, but sometimes our answers are right beneath our feet the whole time because I went to the leadership section of the library, picked up one of John Maxwell's books, and became a voracious reader that really started doing personal development. And after being a guinea pig, I became an author myself, as what happens with a lot of folks who read personal development books and actually take action from them.
Mm. So I think that's really interesting that you had this year of just one massive event after the other, and you found the answers in your library, which is right under your nose at your job.
Oh yeah, yeah. I guess the sense of smell wasn't working for those few years.
So you read this book by John Maxwell. You embarked on a journey of personal development. What did that look like?
Ah, yes, it looked like stepping out of my comfort zone because for
Yeah.
years, like I even mentioned earlier, I was a quiet kid that found his confidence. And finding my confidence was really tapping into my gift of public speaking
Mm.
and taking some lessons from his books. One of the lessons was walking slowly through the crowd. Now, you have to take for granted, like this was BC before COVID, where there's actually more crowds and you could actually shake hands without worrying, like, oh God, am I going to get the evil vid or whatever? Like you can actually, you can actually connect and give regular hugs and share energy with people and all the other good stuff. And so just that one lesson in that book led me to really introducing myself to more people, networking with more people, heck, even joining a wonderful organization called Toastmasters to
Yes.
connect with other people and even joining multiple clubs. Oh my goodness. Are you a Toastmaster too?
I was several years ago, and interestingly, that my kind of big year of personal development and change was 2011, so just about the same time. And I started training as a coach and I joined Toastmasters, and it just completely changed my life. It was like the combination of those two things just sparked a whole new phase in my life.
Ah, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about indeed. That's right. Because I know we also have something else in common. We're both into kickboxing.
Oh, yes. How long have you been doing kickboxing?
Kickboxing been it's been quite a few years actually, because it originally branched off from Taekwondo because I did that starting in late 2010.
Hmm.
Got to blue belt. Then my instructor went out and started his own CrossFit box because he was tired of working under somebody else who was a bad
Mm.
boss. And
Yep.
he wanted to start his own gym. And instead of teaching just Taekwondo classes, he started teaching these kick fit classes, combining CrossFit with Taekwondo, and did that since. So probably about, I think about 7 years in total. I've been slacking off a bit for the past couple years thanks to COVID, but yeah,
Mm.
about 7 years.
Nice. Yeah, me too, actually. I started in 2015, so about the same.
Woohoo! That's what I'm talking about. That's right. That's right. The HD baby. It's HD podcast time, baby. High definition, high
Yes.
definition conversation, high definition content, baby.
So, what point did you start thinking about elite performance, and how did that become something that you started talking about and something that was important to you?
Ah, solid question. It actually, I'd say 2017, because yeah, definitely 2017 is when it crystallized because in that meeting with the boss, like she mentioned that I was actually going to be seen as a leader because I was there for 5 years and she was hiring some new staff at that time. And they were going to be looking at me as somebody as possibly a go-to person. Because, hey, if you're going to be in a place for 5 years, you got to know something, right?
Yeah.
They didn't fire
Hopefully.
you yet, so it's like, like hope you know something. And then down the road, had another meeting with the boss because in 2017, about a good, especially that year, March 2017, about 6 months after publishing my first book, Going North, my father passed away with that darn dementia.
Sorry.
I was lacking some self-awareness and I
Yeah.
was going through some grief where I wasn't really paying attention. That's really where elite performance stems from is self-awareness because like if you have self-awareness, that can branch out into multiple ways of really getting your peak performance state where it needs to be because my boss called me in again at the time. He was like, "Oh yeah, so here's some places where you screwed up. You sure you all right, buddy? Like you sure you're good?" I was like, "Oh, darn, we're at this point again. I thought I wouldn't have this again." And
Hmm.
it's like, "Oh, crap." So after that, just picking up doing some more studies, especially under EQ, emotional intelligence,
Hmm.
and just realizing, you know what? That's what I've been lacking. Like I needed to go deeper into self-awareness because one of the major things I like to do is give myself some time to think and just be silent when I first wake up in the morning. And in addition to that, always checking in more with myself. And that's probably one of the biggest crimes that we can do to ourselves as elite performers that we allow overwhelm to take us because being a high achiever, being a peak performance person, like you're gonna be well, overwhelm's probably gonna come your way because folks are gonna see you as the go-to person. And if you
Hmm.
keep saying yes to everything, but not saying yes to yourself by checking in with yourself, then you'll end up like me at that few years ago, where it's like, oh crap, I thought I was doing good. The darn personal showing up in the professional again. But you have to realize, like, hey, the personal and professional are united. They're
Yeah.
fused together. There's really no separation because parts of your professional life are going to seep into your personal life and vice versa. And you just have to learn to live with that balance and
Hmm.
just try to keep, I guess, the plates spinning in the air as well as you can and keep juggling the balls as well as you can. And if they drop, it's okay if they drop. Just see your life as a game of improv. Like you're going to fail, but that means you're just going to succeed a lot quicker.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. So, how would you define elite performance?
Ah, sure thing. So I define elite performance as consistently giving great customer service to whatever company you're a part of, even
Hmm.
if that's your own,
Hmm.
because that way you cover both entrepreneurs and the employees.
Hmm. And what about your personal life? Because I think it's definitely possible to perform in an elite manner in your personal endeavors.
Oh, yeah, I can say that again because even the business of you yourself,
Yeah.
like you
Yeah.
have to see yourself as not only a person in this game of life, but also playing in the game of business. Like there's going to be times you're going to level up. There's going to be times where you have to grind and
Yeah.
really hopefully get payroll paid
Yeah.
or hopefully fight to eat and survive. Or it's like, hey, I guess I'm doing intermittent fasting by force and not choice this time. It's like, okay.
I've I've been there. Guess I'm gonna go on an extended fast for 3 days because I ran out of money and food. It's been a while since that happened.
Exactly. It's like I'm so glad I wrote those business blocks books so I can finally get past those darn evil Legos. Like,
So, do you think that elite performance is something that came naturally to you? Is that like an innate thing that you kind of grew up with? Or did you have to strive to achieve it? Or did you have to learn how to achieve it? How did that work for you?
powerful question. Not to say elite performance, it was in me. It's in all of us. That's the thing.
Hmm.
Like anyone can be an elite performer. Like you can look all over the darn globe and find wonderful examples of elite performance. Like heck, even at the time of this recording, the Olympics in Beijing, like you can see wonderful folks putting their bodies on the line and doing what they can do to be the best they can be in their fields, like an employee who becomes a well powered entrepreneur. Like that's the other
Hmm.
thing too that needs to actually be put in the forefront too is that hey, entrepreneurship, it's a great thing. It's a romantic thing the way people put it out there. But you have to remember, like, hey, you can't just be a great employee and then be a great entrepreneur. That transition doesn't always happen.
Hmm.
Sometimes folks are better off being an entrepreneur where they take the entrepreneurial mindset and apply it to their own career and rise through the ranks and be like a Steve Ballmer with Microsoft and just actually become a billionaire that way. Because Steve Ballmer, he was in Bill Gates's like inner circle and stayed
Hmm.
with the company for a long time. And still became a billionaire. Heck, even Oprah Winfrey, even though she's entrepreneurial, like she's still an employee because she got a lot of her money from different sponsorships working for a particular company too. So you have
Mm,
to consider all angles of it and just giving that consistent great customer service. And when I say customer service, you have to realize customer service is a life thing. It's not like a hey, bad fast food situation where you got a teenager still learning about life and really just giving you whatever. It's about really keeping the person in front of you in mind, like treating others the way they want to be treated. And that includes yourself, like treating
yeah.
people the way they want to be treated and treating yourself. Because if you treat yourself well, you'll definitely treat a lot of other people well too.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what would you say are some keys to being an elite performer?
Ah, yes, indeed. So there's Alicia Keys. She's definitely like, yeah, that's
Yes, that's the first step.
that's right. No one needs to know that this girl is on fire, baby. Let me stop. Yeah, but seriously, one of the keys for elite performance, classic one is mental awareness. That's the first one. Getting your mind right. Like what you think about, you usually bring about. If you don't want to look for a wonderful brown gorilla and you're at a zoo, you'll definitely see a brown gorilla. Or if you type in brown gorilla in Google and then you see brown gorillas forever, then yeah, you'll definitely see them. And also focusing on staying creative and getting 1% better every day. I know with
Mm,
this wonderful show, you like to focus on adventures. And one of the things that really can help us humans is that not only the fact that we need human connection, human relationships, we also need nature connection, like just going outside and just
yeah,
going for a simple walk. Like that can
yeah.
really help you a lot. Heck, even like reading books on the outside. Like sometimes I would even go to nearby parks and grab a bench and read a book, especially during the spring and summertime, because it's like, you know, that's something different.
Yeah.
Even though it's not like in a coffee shop, the ambient noise, like still being outside and getting the actual wind, getting the actual air, breathing it in, and really re-cleansing your body. Heck, even going barefoot sometimes
Yes.
when the mail appears, I'll just go outside barefoot and
Yeah.
actually just grab some mail. It's a few steps, and I got some glasses so I can see what's in front of me. So it's like, hey, I won't step on a Lego outside, I don't think. So yeah, just doing small things and just keeping your mind fresh so that way you can stay creative because your highest level of creativity is when you are at your highest level of connection with everything around you, whether that's with people or even with nature.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I find that getting outdoors in nature, no matter what I do, whether it's running, walking, sitting, whatever, that it really helps me to connect with myself and to just perform better in every aspect of my life.
Oh yeah. Yes, it did. Yeah, because like this, especially with the early stages of pandemic where it was locked down for real, like, hey, don't go outside, you might die. And
Yeah.
it's like just folks are going crazy. And
Mm,
even though I love the first few weeks of it when I got to go out and get supplies for family and friends and taking care of some neighbors, even though there was no traffic and it was beautiful, a few months later, when folks were allowed to come out the house a bit, people were driving even stupider than ever, and they were even more
uh,
impatient than ever, all because they were trapped in the house for so long. And that's
yeah.
probably one of the main reasons why, heck, this show can be a resource for people. Like getting outside is a requirement. It's definitely a requirement. Heck, even with my elderly mother, I always encourage, like, hey, make sure you get out the house, like stick your head out the door if you
Yeah.
can. Don't stay in the darn house watching the news all day. It'll make you scared for even longer than ever. So yeah, just definitely get outside the house so you won't get crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what are some habits of elite performers that you practice daily?
Solid question. And one of my favorite ones is that a good day starts the night before. So usually
Yeah.
asking myself powerful questions, reflecting on the day. Well, actually, you know what? Let me just drop the acronym now. So the PAR, the PAR method. If you want to have a great day, base it off the PAR method. And PAR. The P is for preparation. For those who aren't driving, this is one of those end moments in the podcast. The P is for preparation. Prepare yourself to have a great day. So the night before, like writing down, okay, what did I learn today? What good did I share today? What, like, as for the learn, like, did I learn something new about a colleague? Did I know a new hack that'll actually amp up my business? Like, one of the major things, like, hey, walking slowly through the crowd, that helped me to become more of an ambivert as opposed to just an introvert. Like, hey, listening to
Mm,
Holly's podcast, it's like, oh, yeah, I need to go back out in nature. Oh, I can actually do aerial photography and as a freaking hobby and get paid for like just
Yeah.
small tips and just focusing on the good. And then the action comes when you write even more questions like, hey, what good will I do today? So you get your brain cooking while you're sleeping of, hey, what good am I going to do today? Am I going to share a good word with somebody? Am I going to call up a friend I haven't talked to in a while and wish them well, see how they're doing? And what can I share is like, can even tie in with the good of just sharing not only a kind word, but hey, somebody may need like some food, feeding a random homeless person you may come across because they may need a meal. And the fifth and final question with that leads to the action piece is, what must I do? Like getting on this podcast is definitely a
Mm.
must and also a win. And also just reaching out to other podcast hosts and seeing if they need podcast guests as well, and fielding off these wonderful pitches from other folks, like focusing on starting a good day by focusing on preparing the night before. And then when you wake up and the day comes, drinking water when I first wake up,
Yes.
because when you first wake up and you have a bio break, you have to really refuel yourself with some wonderful water because that'll help give you energy for the rest of the day, because the difference is amazing. Just try
Yeah.
it for a week and see what happens if you don't already do this, because it's really amazing the difference when you drink water for the first and within the first 30 minutes of you waking
Mm.
up, as opposed to you just getting in the day and just having coffee or orange juice or something instead. Like just start off with water. Like you'll have a lot more energy and you'll feel a lot more light-footed. It's like you're walking on clouds. So preparation, the action during the day, and then the reflection again where you reflect on your day.
Mm. And do you actually sit down with a journal and do you like write out your reflection or do you just think about it?
These days, I usually think about it.
Yeah.
Actually, when I first started out with this, I actually wrote these out on big, fat 4x6 index cards with lines on them. I would write the question, hey, what good did I do today, on the front? Then on the back, I would write my response and then put the date on the bottom. And then after a while, it's got this big old stack of cards. And it's like, oh, yeah. And also with the index cards, like when I write my answers down, not only does my brain cook the answers while I'm asleep, I could even add more when I wake up, but also keeping the card with me in my pocket too. So that way, when I'm out and about, an opportunity may pop up, or I may need a reminder, hey, I got to do this thing. So that's really more of where I am now, just a reflection in the index card as opposed to a journal. Now, granted, I still have a victory log / gratitude journal, but definitely the index cards that works better because it keeps your wonderful focus mobile.
Mm. Yeah, I like that. So tell us about this victory log. What do you keep in there?
Yes. So for those who are familiar with the gratitude journals, being grateful for everything. Like this is like the next level or a way to reframe gratitude, because some folks may be like, gratitude journals.
Yeah.
Like, man, what the heck? Like, I'm already thankful. Like, I don't feel like being thankful. Yeah. Well, how about you just capture your wins instead? Like,
So
no
many
matter.
people resist the gratitude journal. I mean, I don't do it on a regular basis, but when I do, it totally turns my day around. But a lot of people resist it.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's true. Because a lot of the folks, my day job was like, wait, because I'm the company just gave everybody a little small gratitude journal. I think around Christmas time, I was like, oh, thanks for working so hard during the pandemic, guys. And folks were like, oh, gratitude journal, oh joy, yeah, I already got one, thanks. We could have used a raise, but thanks for the
Yeah.
gratitude journal. Yeah, you're so right about that. Heck, I was even on another podcast probably about a month or two ago, and she was actually a teacher, and she was always not a fan of the gratitude journals. But when mentioned the victory log, like seeing your small wins of the day, like, hey, woke up today, that's a win. Got outside today and you ran a 5K, that's a win. Like for Holly, you doing an ultra marathon running, like that's a huge freaking win. Like I give you credit. You're like the third ultra marathoner that I've come across. Like that, that's freaking amazing. Like wins like that, getting on a podcast, starting a
Yeah.
podcast, finishing a book, writing a chapter in a book,
Yeah.
like getting a new contact, being introduced to somebody new, like just writing all those things down, writing 3 big wins or as many wins as you can think of in your head and keep track of them daily. And after a while, you get to look back on them and you have this journal of proof that, hey, you are a winner, like a
Yeah.
classic thing in the personal development, motivational speaking space would be like, hey, you're a winner, you can do it. Well, if you have a victory log, you have proof that you've actually done something and you get to track
Yeah.
and catch these wonderful patterns. So if you don't like the gratitude journal, see yourself as a winner instead and reframe it. Call it a wonderful victory log.
I really like that because I know personally, I'm always looking ahead. I'm always thinking, okay, I've done all these things, but like I want to do this next and I want to do that and I want to do the other and I have to do all these things to prepare for that. And it's like I don't often take the time to acknowledge my victories, to acknowledge what I've done. And I think that would be really, really helpful.
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. Like it's freaking made changes in my life. Like ever since I think it was like December 2020, I think. Yeah, back when I had Sam Leibowitz on my show and he mentioned that to me. He's like, hey, do it for 90 days. Like, let me know what happens. I'm like, dude, the confidence went through the roof. I'm like a mighty oak tree now.
Nice. So, you one of the things you talk about is developing a rock solid positive mental attitude. So, how does one develop a rock solid positive mental attitude and why is this so important?
Yeah, so for all my wrestling fans, Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, like that is how you develop a rock solid positive mental attitude. You tell people off and you let them know you're gonna lay the smack down on people. That's right.
Not sure if I want to adopt that one, but keep going. Tell us more.
I was just messing with you. I love messing with people on that. But it's like, yeah, but it's definitely important. Like a positive mental attitude, especially a rock solid one, is very important because the thing is, a lot of positive people, a lot more people want to hang around you. Now,
Yeah.
granted, there's a lot of people where it's like, especially the folks who can be curmudgeon like, it's like, I don't want more people to be around me. Like, it's not the point here. That's why I go into the woods from time to time so I can talk to the trees and not the humans. but, but here we are, because they're better together, believe it or not. And not only makes you more attractive to people and makes you more of a magnet to people, like the thing is, people are going to want to help you out more than ever because the thing is, like, you never know when you're going to need somebody in the future. Heck, even a colleague of mine, he was actually like close to senior citizen age and he wasn't very good with computers. And when the pandemic started, like
Mm,
he actually had to do this darn telework process and he didn't have a computer or anything because he doesn't do computers, although he can learn. He is tenacious
mm.
and he had all these friends that he connected with and that owed him favors and he called him in and he got set up with a new fancy smartphone that he could
Mm.
be taught on and a wonderful laptop with the Windows 10 and everything like that, and was able to still keep one of his part-time jobs because he was actually built up. He basically dug his well before he was thirsty. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Like a positive mental attitude helps you to dig your well before you're thirsty. And not only that, it helps you to feel a lot more healthier and a lot more stronger. And it can even help you deal with not so great days in a greater way because the thing is we're all going to have bad days. That's the other thing too. I need to remind people, like, no matter how happy a person may seem to be, they're still human. Like you have to remember that a positive mental attitude doesn't mean you're Pollyanna. Oh,
Yeah.
there's nothing but roses without thorns. Like, hey, the ground is sand. I can be barefoot all the time and have my dress flowing in the wind or have a windswept jacket looking like a cool freaking private eye detective. Like, no, it's not that all the time. There's going to be setbacks. That's the other thing
Yeah.
about a positive mental attitude, just dealing better with setbacks. And the major way to develop a positive mental attitude is another pen moment coming up is what I call the rave method. RAVE.
Okay.
So the R for rave stands for reading. Reading great material. So if you read Holly's books and you're reading some of them, you're on the right path, y'all. The A stands for audio immersion. So for those listening this far in the show, you're doing fabulous. Audio immersion.
You're
Listening to
already
great.
doing it, guys.
That's right. And the V stands for visual stimulation. So heck, with Holly and I, like we both have done a form of martial arts before, and like looking up videos online with YouTube. Thank God for YouTube
Yeah.
is and just boosting our training when we're not in the gym or in the dojo or the kickboxing
Hmm.
box, like being able to practice solo and then see others and have that symbiotically transfer to our abilities too. So visual stimulation, like making sure that whatever you watch is something that'll help you become better, because images, like we can see millions of images per millisecond as opposed to like hearing words.
Hmm.
So you have to make sure you're careful with the images that you have. Heck, that's even
Yes.
why a lot of wonderful famous businesses like Nike, McDonald's, Starbucks, like they have those logos that you instantly recognize as opposed to just words. Like our brains focus more on images. We're visual people, and that's why that's the third letter in the rave. So we got reading great material, we got audio immersion, listening to great audio material, getting in your ears. The V for visual stimulation, making sure you take care of what you're looking at, because heck, even another extra for you. The eyes are also the only exterior part of your brain, too. Another reason why
Mm.
that's a part of the rave method and taking care of your brain and watching great stuff. But also, the E to put the nice bottle cap on this bottle of positivity is encouragement, encouraging yourself and others. Because if you're living and breathing, you need encouragement.
Yeah. Yeah, especially in these weird times. We've had such a difficult last 2 years, and I think the more we can encourage ourselves and each other to just get going and do the stuff we want to do, even though things are challenging, I think that's massively important.
Oh yeah, I can say that again. Like, dude, encouragement is a wonderful thing. Like, especially if you're like, especially being a peak performer, like an elite performer. Like elite performers, they tend to be in a certain top percentage of wherever they are, whereas the top two, top one. And sometimes the air gets a little thin at the top where it's like you kind of put yourself in a silo, especially if you're an entrepreneur, where like sometimes you feel like you're alone in the battle, and that's not good for you. And that's why encouragement's a wonderful thing, encouraging other people and having other people encourage you. Heck, even also an add on to the victory log. Sometimes if folks leave me some positive comments or reviews, I screenshot it and put it in a file on my computer and go back and look in them later,
Mhm.
just to remind myself of, hey, some past wins, of, hey, I'm actually making a difference in people's lives here, and using that for encouragement too. Because, hey, everybody truly needs encouragement. No matter
Yeah.
how well off people seem to be, they need encouragement. Like, heck,
Yeah.
even recent story with that, sadly, I believe that I think she won Miss USA and committed suicide at
Yeah.
the age of 30. Like, people need encouragement. You don't know what people are going through.
Exactly. Exactly. So, Dom, how do you apply these kind of elite performance tactics or approaches to your adventures, like kickboxing, for example?
Oh yeah, that's right. Gotta enjoy the adventure. So the encouragement, encouraging 5 random people a day. Definitely
Ooh. Hmm.
5 random people a day. I like to do that usually. And it's become subconscious at this point because I try to do it by default. If someone has a nice piece of clothing on or some cool sunglasses, like, hey, like what you have on there, and just give them a nice solid detailed compliment. So that way, hey, they know it's real. Also, with going out and about with the adventures, the encouragement, like the visual stimulation. Heck, even what I mentioned earlier with reading books on the
Mm.
outside, like going in a
Yep.
park, whatever, and taking in some real fresh air as opposed to being in the coffee shops or early
Yeah.
pandemic being trapped in the house in front of the darn police station, like avoiding that. And heck, even also with like adventures, like also listening to podcasts on the go, if it's like a walk or heck, even a run,
Mm.
and just really just small things like that. Heck, even I remember, and one thing I probably need to get back into, I still remember like the retreats used to take back in high school, especially our big senior trip where we went to some mountains in North Carolina. I was able to do zip lining for the first time, and it was like, wow, this is freaking amazing, because it was like something I never even considered, but just going zip lining, and definitely want to
Mm.
do more of that in the future as well. And it really just expanded my thinking, especially with all the hiking that was required in that area, because it was like so many steps. It was like there were so many steps during that particular trip. It like it was actually easier to go up than it was to go down, funny enough.
Going down but can be scary sometimes.
Yeah, I was like, what the fudge? Like, why do I feel lethargic going down? It's supposed to be in reverse. What's going on?
So, Dom, you've written a couple of books. Can you tell us a little bit more about them?
Sure thing. So there's a first one, Going North, Tips and Techniques to Advance Yourself. It's a synthesized self-help package for the distracted mind because it
Mm,
contains stuff that I've actually done and applied and believe, and I've done it in my own life. Same with the follow-up book, Stay the Course, which came out of my father's passing, the grief and discovering self-awareness, because funny enough, I only mentioned one of the keys in this wonderful book. It's the extended title, Stay the Course, the Elite Performer's 7 Secret Keys to Sustainable Success. There's actually 7 other keys because there's a
ooh,
bonus key in the back of the book if you make it to the end as well. And they're both books that are under 100 pages. They're also in audiobook form because I know everybody
yeah.
doesn't want to make the time to read and we're all on the go all the time. And they're both books filled with stuff that I've actually done in my own life or that I actually believe and encourage people to really get these books, because especially out of the first one, like out of that one book that helped me to really start and build a business and a brand, like 7 people became published authors after seeing me in action.
Nice.
And they were 10, 20, some even 40 years older than me at the time, because they're like, wait a second, this freaking millennial wrote a freaking book. Wait a second, I've been wanting to write a book for freaking 30 years. All right, let me get on my freaking bottom. Let me get off my butt and get in action. They joined the business of immortality too. So if you don't get anything out of any of this other conversation with this wonderful show, is the fact that action is the inspiration. Like your
Yep.
action today can be someone's inspiration tomorrow.
Yep. And that never fails to surprise me. I mean, I just by telling my stories and just by talking about the stuff that I do, I've had so much great feedback from people who've been like, oh, I never thought I could be a runner, but I gave it a try and I can. Or, I've written books about long distance trails and people have, taken up that as well. Like it's just, I love the fact that when we share the things that we do, we inspire other people to give it a try.
Yeah, that's right. Give it a try, yo. That's right. Give it a good old college try, metaphorically. That's right.
Yeah.
You might like it
Yeah,
or hate it.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. And if you hate it, that's just feedback. You just know, you're not going to do that again. You can try something else. So, it's just experimentation.
Plus, it'll make a great story later, depending on how bad it was.
Exactly. Exactly.
Or good.
Yeah. Don't do this. Don't be like me. So,
It's
Dom,
like,
where can people find you online and learn more about what you do?
yes, indeed. So I like to keep it easier for folks. So if you type in Dom Brightman on Google, you'll find me. And if you go to dombrightman.com, that's dombrightman.com, you'll find all things Dom on dombrightman.com, especially the Going North podcast, where I interview authors from all over the world to inspire, encourage, and help others to share their stories too. And be on the lookout for Holly's episode when she comes on Going North as well, where I get to return the favor, all on dombrightman.com.
Fantastic. So, on your podcast, you interview authors from all over the world. Who else do you talk to?
Oh yeah, definitely authors. But the thing is, it's a vast array of authors. Because funny
Mm.
enough, the show I was originally going to interview only self-published authors,
Oh,
especially nonfiction ones, since 95% of what I read is nonfiction. But then I met a fiction author who was kind of like a local hometown hero, and she put me on her social media, and I'm like, I feel kind of bad not invited on the show. So yeah, I got a fiction author. It was like, oh, I don't think I'll ever have a romance author on my show. And then out of nowhere, I was in a book with one where she was like the term's multi-potentialite, where she had all these wonderful interests. She's a mom, a wife, a nurse. She had a romance novel under a different pen name. And I'm like, oh, well, I guess I'll have her to show that, like, even though it's all authors, they all have different interests and different genres and different beliefs.
hmm.
Like, heck, I've even had a tarot
Oh,
psychic reader on my show at early this year, Corby Metlied. Like 10 years ago, I wouldn't even entertain the thought of talking to a psychic who reads tarot. Like, especially because I was heavily like strong, staunch, dogmatic Christian like 10
mm,
years ago. So, but now as I've explored and lived a little, I'm a little bit more open to talking to a lot more different folks. So even though it's only authors, they have different businesses and interests. So that keeps it entertaining.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Yes, I could talk to you for freaking hours. Like, we got to do this again. Thanks so much for having me on your show, Holly. I freaking appreciate you.
Thank you. You have a great day.
Woohoo.
Please drop me a line and let me know what you thought of this week's episode. You can email me at holly@hollywharton.com or find me online and get in touch there. If you enjoyed this episode, you might want to check out these related episodes. 388, I talk about how to give yourself credit and why it's so important. 372, I discuss how outdoor adventures can help us achieve our life goals. 369, I talk about getting out of your comfort zone with outdoor adventures. 364, I discuss personal growth through outdoor adventure. And finally, 343, I talk about what to do when you feel like you're not good enough. So, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe if you haven't already. And if you can, please leave a quick review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. That just helps new people find the show. So, thank you again for listening, and remember to visit hollywharton.com/448 for the show notes on this episode. Happy trails to you. Thanks so much for listening to Into the Woods with Holly Wharton. You can find more information about today's episode, including links for topics that were discussed, at hollywharton.com. That's HOLLYWORTON.com. If you'd like to connect with other listeners and get support on your journey, I would love for you to join my private community on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Holly Wharton. That's patreon.com/Holly Wharton. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next week.